Well, here we are, everybody. I apologize for the delay. Sometimes, as we're finding recently, you do all that you can beforehand to get everything ready, and it doesn't always work. So had some glitches as I was preparing to go live here today and had to restart some things and got it working. The good news is I think part of it is because we're improving our Wi-Fi. We had it upgraded today to be able to handle more bandwidth, and with the ability to have more data flowing through here, we should be able to eliminate some of these problems. But again, that switch just happened today, and so I think we're experiencing some of the just the kinks kind of working out of the system there. So appreciate your patience with us. But let's just jump in now to the Bible since we're here. Well, I say that. Let's just quickly get through just a couple of announcements as we make sure you guys are brought up to speed on important stuff in this class. So as I do that, let me just double check and make sure everything is showing up where it's supposed to online. So I'm going to pull up my browser here, check both Facebook and YouTube. Oh, and as I do so, I realize that one of the technical glitches that some of the software used to stream stuff is getting the titles wrong for the stream. So you are here for Wednesday Bible study, even though it might say morning prayer. But I'm just going to check here and make sure that that it is all good. I'm seeing Karen is saying she's looking for the feed, and I get the frustration there. So let me see if I can respond to her. Thank you, Karen, for your patience. We will continue to work this out. But let me, again, check and make sure that it is actually streaming here. I know this isn't the most exciting part of the class, but I promise. Yes, it's good. It's good. It is streaming. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I am so grateful to you. And I promise we'll get this worked out. So Sue Townsend is here, Joy is here, Gail, Tommy, and hopefully more people will be able to find it as we kind of dig in here. So let me just get through the announcements and just the kind of class orientation stuff. So we have today in the Gospel of Luke, we'll be doing chapter 6 of the class. And just as a reminder, upcoming, we will not have class on November 25. As we celebrate Thanksgiving. If you want the calendar, email Hillary, and of course Hillary is always the person to contact for all questions about the class. If you have questions about God, the Bible, theology, the Gospel of Luke, you can write me. But again, the logistical stuff is all going to be Hillary's area of expertise. So let's get into the study, and before we do so, we'll just say a little prayer. Dear God, help us as we study your word, and make it something that will sink deeply into our hearts and help us with what's going on in our lives. Inspire us by your Holy Spirit, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so here we are today for our class on Luke chapter 6. But before we do that, I do want to recap a little bit from last week, just to make sure we're all sort of on the same page. Last week, there was a miraculous catch of fish. Jesus was on the beach teaching, and there was such a big crowd. He asked St. Peter to put his boat out in the water just a little bit, and so Jesus could stand there in the boat, or maybe sit in the boat. That's safer. Never stand in a boat. And taught the people. And then after he was done teaching, he invited Peter to go out into deep water, put down his nets, and Peter had a bad attitude. Peter was the expert fisherman. Jesus was not a fisherman. Peter had been fishing all night and had caught nothing. But just sort of to humor Jesus, Peter begrudgingly puts his net into the water and catches so many fish he has to get people help him to bring them into the boat. And Peter realizes that in spite of his bad attitude, his lack of faith, and all of that, Jesus still provided graciously for him, and then calls Peter into ministry and says, "Come follow me." And right before that, Peter, when seeing the miraculous catch, says, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man," just falls down before Jesus. And his leadership is based in that humility, in that recognition that he doesn't deserve to be leader. Any good leader on some level, is going to have that kind of humility. Like, I don't deserve this. I'm not the greatest. Like, you got a good leader is going to be aware of his or her own clay feet and his or her own humanity and flaws, and can therefore have compassion on others and can be an effective leader. So we see that in St. Peter. And so Jesus not only calls Peter, but also calls Levi. Levi was a tax collector. We know him as Matthew. And Levi is in the middle of his tax collecting. And tax collecting was deeply unethical for lots of reasons we talked about last week, and would have meant he was a betrayer of his own Jewish people. And yet Jesus calls him into ministry. So we're 2 for 2 on calling sinners into ministry. And then Jesus continued his ministry of healing leper, touching him amazingly, which was not done, and healing a paralytic, and not only that, forgiving the paralytic's sins. And you get to have this drumbeat of Jesus' divinity throughout the Gospel of Luke. Obviously, at the beginning, prophesied when the angel came to Mary about who her child would be, but now he does things like forgive sins. Not forgiving the sins of people who hurt him, but forgiving the sins of somebody that had no connection to him, this paralytic who was brought there for healing. It's like you walking around H-E-B and just pointing to people and saying, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. I mean, that's something only God can do. And so he ends it by talking about new wine and new wineskins, that Jesus is totally new. He's not new boss, same as the old boss. This is a radically new kind of ministry. So those give us our big ideas. Jesus' power over nature. We see this in the miraculous catch of fish. Obviously, he is the Lord of creation, and as the one who was there at the beginning of creation, through whom all things were made, he can have power over nature. But we also see Jesus' power over sin, and that he forgives sinners. You can also see, by the way, the power over nature in the way he heals a leper. I mean, that's a skin disease that has physiological, biological, neurological components, and Jesus has power over that. So, and also just, as I said, the newness of Jesus. So those are the big ideas. This week we're going to turn to Luke chapter 6 now, and Jesus is going to get controversial on purpose. He's going to poke the bear, meaning the establishment, the religious establishment, almost intentionally to get them upset at him, to teach them an important thing they need to know. And he also is going to turn the world upside down in Luke's recounting of the teaching of what we call the Beatitudes. And then also we're going to find out that Jesus is an avid listener and great fan of the Beach Boys. So we'll come to all of those things. So before we do all that, let me now bring up the text so we can read it, and then we'll start walking through it. And as I read it, as I always remind you, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, things that seem weird in the text, put those in the comment section on the Facebook post or the chat window in the YouTube, and hopefully we can then I can address those questions. So I always want this to be as interactive as possible, and so that'll be I think good. As I'm doing this, by the way, I'm watching the YouTube feed. I'm not sure, again, I went to seminary. I'm not a computer science or digital broadcasting major. I'm seeing this live stream of this class is going to YouTube on 2 destinations. They're both incorrectly labeled morning prayer. One has 3 people watching, one has 1 person watching. Sorry about that. I think, though, you're getting the content, and hopefully this will all work out in the end. And again, we'll figure this stuff out. Like I said, we've increased our bandwidth, and hopefully a lot of these problems will be fixed in the future. So again, appreciate your patience and graciousness with us. All right, so now moving on, as I said, I'm going to bring up the reading here, put it on the screen, and we can talk through it. I'm excited to go through this passage with you. It is rich stuff, some of the greatest hits here of Jesus' teaching and ministry. So, full screen. And here we go. And I'm going to make this... Oh, internet. Look at me, 2 times in one screen. Okay. Let's try that again. I think the window that had the Bible passage crashed, so let's bring that up one more time. Okay, I think we got it. Good to go. Luke chapter 6, and as always, reading in the ESV. That's what I use for teaching, at least. It's not the one we use in services here for reading, but this is the one I use. I like this translation. It's a good one. Okay, so let's read along. On a Sabbath, while Jesus was going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked and ate some heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" And Jesus answered them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and also gave it to those with him? And he said to them, The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." On another Sabbath he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was withered, and the scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath, so that they might find a reason to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come and stand here." And he rose and stood there. And Jesus said to him, "I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save your life or to destroy it?" And after looking around at them all, he said to them, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. In these days he went out to the mountain to pray, and all night he continued in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples, and chose from them 12, whom he named apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James, and John, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. And he came down with them and stood on a level place, with a great crowd of his disciples, and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem, and the sea coast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all the crowd sought to touch him, for power came out from him and healed them all. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, and revile you, and spurn your name as evil, on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day, and leap for joy. For behold, your reward is great in heaven, for so their fathers did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all people speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies, and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. He also told them a parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, Brother, let me take out the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eye. For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person, out of the good treasure of his heart, produces good, and the evil person, out of his evil treasure, produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house, who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of the house was great. Here endeth the lesson. So that is Luke chapter 6, and I now invite you to take a moment, and as you do so, I'll look at the chat here and see if there are any comments that you have on either of the YouTube streams that's happening right now, or on Facebook. And I see Marina has joined us, Marilee, Wanda, Kathy and Sarah, other people. If you're on this class, by the way, unless you comment in the comments, I don't know who you are. So if you're a new person, I always love it when people introduce themselves and say hi. Or if you're a regular, you can do that, and I'd be glad to see you're here. But yeah, let me just give you a second and see if you have any questions or comments, anything that jumped out at you in this passage. All right, Karen is here. Finally got on. Yeah, sorry, Karen, you missed the beginning where I apologized for the ongoing technical glitches that are plaguing us here. But as I said, we have upgraded our network as of today, which is actually probably why we had some problems getting on this morning. But yes, hopefully we will get all these things worked out. So, as Tommy said, thank God for grace. Yes, this is a big part of this passage. Well, let's jump into Luke 6, and if I don't see any questions. Marina is new. Well, welcome, Marina. Glad you're here. If you do have questions as we continue to talk through this passage, as always, just put them on there. Yes, and yeah, Candy has a great sort of summary. Love means action. Absolutely, as the scriptures say, if we love. But just in word only, it basically doesn't count. This is sort of the whole point of 1 Corinthians 13 and also the book of James and lots of other places. So yeah, let's talk through Luke chapter 6. This passage, by the way, if you don't feel sort of undone, eviscerated, convicted, whatever kind of words you want to use, sort of laid low in a sense, but also really helped at the same time, then you don't get what's going on in this passage. So I'm excited to talk to you about it. We learned a lot of really amazing stuff about Jesus himself and his message which is so revolutionary, so inconvenient, so countercultural, so at odds with everything that we are all taught, even today as Christians, in a country that has been so deeply influenced by Christianity. I'm feeling a sneeze coming on. Oh, golly. See, this is live video. How exciting. I'm like trying to not sneeze while I'm trying to put up some other image on the screen so you don't have to watch me sneeze. But in doing so, now my sneeze is gone. So that was very suspenseful live TV drama here. Okay, but now I've got my tissue, so if it comes back, I can maybe cut away here for a moment. Okay, so no, see what's going on now? Don't do that. Okay, come back. All right. So Luke 6 begins with on a Sabbath. And it's important just to note that this is not just the day that Chick-fil-A is closed. Sabbath is a big deal. In Jesus' day and in Israel today and in observant Jewish communities today, it is a big deal. It is hard to understand how big a deal it is. For us Gentiles, we tend to not really observe the Sabbath very carefully. It's a really big deal. You have to make all your food Friday before sundown so that you don't have to cook or do any chores or food preparation or anything from Friday at sundown until Saturday at sundown. So, and you're not really allowed to do any work. And this was a gracious gift that was given to the people of Israel. You can see it in Genesis, how God rests on the seventh day. This is the origin of the Sabbath. It's codified in the Ten Commandments. It's a weird one. We think Ten Commandments mean don'ts. Don't lie. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't murder. We forget that there's also these commandments that are affirmations, like love God, love and honor your parents, and keep the Sabbath. Keep it holy. Which again, this seems weird. It's like it's why that's not ethics. Like ethics are like be a nice person, don't be a mean person. What's this thing about resting? That's not ethical. It's not a moral category. At least not in our thinking. But it was so important to God that he makes it one of the Ten Commandments. Like, when if you are someone who has lied or stolen or committed adultery and you felt really bad about it, have you also broken the Sabbath? And if so, do you feel really bad about that? Probably not, because we've moved so far from thinking that there's anything kind of bad about not resting. We actually are the opposite. We tend to think that people that rest too much are lazy, and the virtues we really extol are people that like work so hard, and I work hard and I play hard. That's like the opposite of the Sabbath. So anyways, big deal in Jesus' day, and still is in Israel, as I said. You could go to Israel, and if you went to a hotel, you went to the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, you would find that on the Sabbath, the elevators are in what's called Sabbath mode. Meaning, if you walk in the lobby, you'll walk up to the elevator, you will not push a button, the door will simply open, you can walk onto the elevator, it will then stop at every floor, and the doors will open at every floor, all the way to the top, and then it'll just do the same thing on the way down, it'll get to the lobby again, and it'll open. That way people can use the elevator to get to their floor, but without pushing a button, because pushing a button represents work. So this is when I was in college, there were some dorms that were designated. If you were a observant, a part of one of the sects in Judaism, one of the parts of that Jewish family that is more observant around the Sabbath, there were particular dorms you could use. All the dorms had electric key pads. You would hold your student ID up to the pad, and the door would unlock. But again, that's the use of electricity. So, if you were an observant Jewish person, you would be put in these special dorms that did not have the keypad. They had a door that could be opened with a key. You could put a key into the lock and turn it and open it that way, as opposed to using the keypad again, so you wouldn't have to use electricity on the Sabbath. So, it's a big deal, the Sabbath. And there is Jesus walking through the grain fields. We sort of see it as this, I always think of Sting and his singing, like walking through fields of gold, fields of barley. And his disciples are plucking grain. Now, the scriptures say that it's okay to pluck grain, but it's not okay to like harvest it with a tool or to use some sort of implement. So the thing that the Pharisees might have gotten really mad at here is when the disciples take the grain and they start rubbing it. Because, grain is inside of a husk, an inedible husk. And so they're separating the wheat from the chaff, quite literally. They're rubbing it between their hands to basically peel the grains so that they can then eat them. Now, interestingly, in verse 2, the Pharisees who are watching, they're always watching, they say, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" Now, we may have just read, his disciples plucked and ate some grain, rubbing them in their hands, and we think that this was the disciples being naughty. But when the Pharisees say you, if you look at the Greek, the original language, the you there is plural. So it's why do all y'all are doing this? So, and even if Jesus wasn't doing it, it's a technicality because this was his disciples were his disciples. Like he's responsible for them. So, anyways, it's a plural you, so I think we can assume that Jesus was doing this too. It's very provocative. He's a rabbi. He's a teacher. He knows what he's doing, and he's not only condoning, but likely doing himself this thing of, while not prohibited in Scripture, certainly prohibited in the teaching of the Pharisees, their interpretation, because the Sabbath just says don't work. That's the rule. But then we human beings are always looking for, well, can you define the rule a little bit more clearly? They had all kinds of definitions about what constituted work. And so here, they're breaking those rules. And so they're saying, why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath? And the passage does not convey, when we read it that way, like the level of offense here. For us to think about how offensive Jesus' actions here, because it just seems it's so nice. He's like walking through a field. He's rubbing some grains. I think it's like sunset. It's the golden hour. But what's actually happening here, the emotional response the Pharisees would have here is almost like, I'm not meaning to be offensive here, but you just got to understand how like sacred the Sabbath was and how serious this violation was. It's almost like when somebody in our country burns an American flag. Or I remember when Roseanne Barr sang the national anthem, and she sang it off key and sort of in an irreverent way. And the level of offense that people feel at that when something sacred is sort of trampled upon, that's how Jesus's observers would have felt about this action of this breaking the Sabbath. To us, it's something so simple. It's just, eating some grain, but it is a big deal. So Jesus is getting controversial here intentionally. He knows the Pharisees are watching him, and they do this thing. And he says to them, and he's pointing out what you can read about in 1 Samuel chapter 26, when King David, not yet king, is in trouble. He's in pursuit, and his disciples, he and his soldiers, fellow men that he's commanding there, go into the house of God. They go in the temple, and they eat the bread of the presence, this holy bread that's in the Holy of Holies place in the temple, which was not lawful for anybody to eat except the priests. But David ate it because there was a need there, and the implication was that David was David. He was the anointed king. He was the one who was going to bring peace to Israel, and he's God's chosen one. So he had the right to do this. And so Jesus is saying, if David has the right to do this, I, who am even greater than David, certainly have the right to eat grain on the Sabbath. And he calls himself Lord of the Sabbath. And it's really important to note that to call yourself Lord of the Sabbath is basically claiming to be God, because the Sabbath is God's holy rest after creation. It is ongoing now. It's like the ongoing rest of God. And to say that you're Lord of the Sabbath is saying you're God. That is what that term means. No one gets to say they're Lord of the Sabbath. So Jesus is claiming to be God. And the thing that I want to note with you in this, so Jesus is claiming this incredible divine power, this incredible divine status. He's calling himself Lord of the Sabbath. And look at what he uses the Sabbath to do in this example. He'll do more kind of noble things later on when he breaks the Sabbath rules. But here, he uses his Sabbath power to give his disciples a snack, which is pretty wonderful, I think. It's helping them. It's not even like they were starving and hadn't had a meal in a week. Like it's just it's very casual. They're just eating a snack as they walk through the grain fields. It's Jesus caring about even the little things in your day. And sometimes people in their prayer requests, they always feel like, I lead a lot of Bible studies, or I used to pre-corona, with people around them, and we would do prayer requests. And people always have like really big prayer requests. And I always pray for, their aunt who is sick, or their family member who is dying, and really serious stuff, and I get it. But what this passage shows is that God also cares about the little things in your life. God cares about your snacking. He's Lord of the Sabbath, and he uses his great power so the disciples can eat some grain on their day off. So next time you have a snack, next time you go for a quick Starbucks break, or, pick up a tangerine. I don't know what your snacks are, your Cheetos, your Tostitos, whatever you snack on. Just know I have a drawer full of snacks, actually. I keep a lot of nuts and dried fruit around here, as well as some Take 5 candy bars, as I've said before, the best candy bar in the world. And God cares about even those little things, those little parts of your day, your snacking. And so that's kind of this cool message in this passage. So, all right. So that now is, we've gotten through 5 verses. So let's steam on through. I think we can cover some more ground here. The next story is Jesus healing a man with a withered hand. In the, I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear now. This always happens when I wake or drive. You hear a fire truck going by. We hear lots of sirens. So let's pray. Dear God, we pray for whoever's in that truck driving, and who's ever hurt or in need that they're going to, that you would be present and save. Amen. So we now come to this part where there's a man with a withered hand in the synagogue on the Sabbath. So he's had some sort of maybe an accident, or maybe it's a congenital issue, meaning he was born with it. And Jesus sees him there. And again, he's going to intentionally poke the bear. He's in church on the Sabbath. Clearly, this is not a time to do work or anything that people might think is work. And he knows the Pharisees are watching him. He's already gotten in hot water with them. And even so, he intentionally stirs up this controversy. He says, okay, withered hand man, stand up. Makes it really visible. There's not hiding. If he wanted to, he could have just sort of heal his hand. And the man's hand would have he'd be sitting there in church, and suddenly he'd look down and his hand was healed. And the Pharisees would not have to know. But Jesus, again, he pokes the bear. He pokes the hornet's nest. So it says he knows their thoughts, because Jesus always knows what people are thinking. And he says to the man, come stand here. So let's all see you with your hand. And then he asks this question, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or destroy it? The answer sort of is obvious, it should be lawful to do good and to save life on the Sabbath. Jesus is saying, you guys are missing the forest for the trees. I always feel a little sheepish with my water bottle. I feel sort of dumb drinking from it, but I get parched when I'm talking like this so much. So thank you. So he says, he asks this question. It's a rhetorical question. The answer is obvious. And then to demonstrate and to sort of put them to shame, he then says, to this man, stretch out your hand. And Jesus heals him on the Sabbath. And of course, it says the Pharisees are filled with fury. Now, isn't that incredible? The religious folks are mad that this man has had his livelihood restored. Because with his hand withered, he would not have been able to work. He would not have been able to support his family. It would have been a crushing injury for his social and professional life. And so this incredible miracle has happened. And what the Pharisees are upset about is that Jesus has done this on the Sabbath. Even though actually healing was not prohibited on the Sabbath in the scriptures. It was just kind of their tradition. So this is Jesus demonstrating his lordship of the Sabbath. His wanting people to see the forest, not just the trees, to kind of get the big idea, and opens us up to something that's really central in Christian ethics. And this chapter is going to get a lot into Christian ethics. This is the area of thought of how do we know what's the right thing to do? And a lot of us get focused, like the Pharisees, on the rules, missing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture meaning to love and to heal and to restore. And sometimes you have to actually break the rules in order to do what's right. I heard an example on a podcast once about a father who was traveling with his child. He was an Israeli father, actually. And the child had, I think, left a bag or something that had the child's iPad in it with a game that the kid loved. And if you ever traveled with a child, you know how important it is to have a way to distract your child when you're waiting for the flight or on the flight. And so the bag had been sort of in left on the plane and now was kind of confiscated, and so it was in this like lost and found area. And this father went to pick up the child's bag, the little backpack that's there, and he can actually see it. It's just behind the counter, and he's talking to the agent there, saying, "I see my bag, can I get it?" And she was not allowed to give it to him because there was some regulation about identification and lost bags and stuff like that. And so she was focusing on the rule, missing the bigger picture of this child who would like to have his bag back, to have his game and his beloved stuffed animal that's in that bag and all these sorts of things. And I think about the nuns in The Sound of Music, where they steal the components out of the Nazis' car so that the engine doesn't start. Here is another example, whereas the ticket agent lady was not breaking the rules, definitely missed the forest for the trees, was being a stickler for the rules, and in doing so was actually not showing love and was hurting the heart of a child. And then, but the nuns in The Sound of Music, they actually do break the rules. They do vandalize government property, this Nazi vehicle, in order to do the bigger thing, which is to help the Von Trapp family escape. Always help the Von Trapps escape. So, anyways, Jesus' approach to Christian ethics puts love and care for the weak and vulnerable above rules. So rules are important, definitely. Not saying that they don't matter. But there's a time when the loving thing is to break the rules. And figuring that out is really tricky. I'm not saying it's not tricky. But this gives us a perspective on how we should think through ethical dilemmas in our own life. A Christian always wants to ask, what's the loving thing to do? And what's the thing that shows compassion for the person? So, and the answer is not always the same in every case. So it leads to some open questions. Christian ethics is not easy always. But anyway, so you see this beginning kind of here in Jesus' teaching. We do get the calling of the disciples. I'm not going to say too much about it other than it's pretty clear and wonderful that Jesus himself has to spend a lot of time in prayer before he calls and actually not the disciples, he calls the apostles. The disciples, that's a word that means student. And Jesus had lots of students, lots of people who followed his teachings in his day. An apostle means somebody who is sent, a sent one. So this is a different level. Disciples is sort of the great horde, the crowd of people. The apostles are ones who are appointed to positions of leadership, sort of ambassadors, being sent out. Apostoleo means to send out. So these sent ones to share the message of Jesus. So these 12 that he picks, again, we should note that 12, the 12 tribes of Israel and all that stuff. And the other thing to note here is that he picks people that we already know are knuckleheads. Matthew, also known as Levi, the tax collector. Peter, the fisherman with little faith and sort of an arrogance about him. We're even told that Judas Iscariot will be a traitor. Simon, called the zealot, meaning he would have been sort of a political firebrand. Now, zealot is somebody like, these days, people that are zealots are people that are out there protesting with signs, either on the right or the left. These are zealots for their cause. Whether you're an Antifa zealot or you're a right-wing zealot or whatever you are, zealot. So Simon is one of these people that's probably like marched in protest and stuff like that against the Romans, and he might have advocated violent overthrow of the Roman government at some point. So Jesus has a whole mix of people here in his apostles, his sent ones. All right, so now we get into the Sermon on the Plain. In Matthew's Gospel, it's the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus goes up on a mountain to teach this. In Luke's Gospel, he goes down to a plain, a level place, it says in verse 17, for this message. This is probably not the only time Jesus taught that. That's why in Matthew's Gospel, he records a time when Jesus taught it on a mountain. Here in Luke's Gospel, he records it at a time when Jesus gave this speech on a plain, a Plain, a level place. Jesus went around to all these different places and had to kind of give the same teaching in all these places because he was trying to get this message out. This is a bit of a stump speech, sort of. A political candidate will go from town to town to town and basically always give the same speech with a little bit of changing for the local place, and that's kind of what Jesus did here. So this sermon, this speech, contains, again, these kind of key ideas in Jesus' ministry, some of the main points. We do hear in verse 17 that there are people from Judea, from Jerusalem, and the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon. So as always, I'm big into showing you the maps. Here is the map. I'm going to bring it up here. Map. Okay. So here is where Jesus is right now, probably. He's still up here in the Galilee region, the northern part of Israel, up there at the top. And he is bringing people from, it says Judea, which is, again, this area down here, Jerusalem, city down here, and from Tyre and Sidon, which is this coastal region here, but even farther north. So let's see if I have I don't have a wider view. But anyways, the important thing to know here is that this is a diverse group of people. Jerusalem would have been the city dwellers, the important people. The people from Galilee are kind of like the rednecks, the country folks. And the people from Tyre and Sidon are like the foreigners from the north and Gentiles. So Jesus is drawing all kinds of people. And it says they want what? Healing. And they want their troubled spirits cured. Now, if that doesn't connect with where we are today, I don't know what does, because people need healing and people have troubled spirits. And there's also, so Jesus, the hallmarks of Jesus' ministry: teaching, exorcism, and healing. That is all contained in all this sort of stuff. And we hear what is echoed in other places in the scripture, that even touching Jesus caused power to come out from him, and healing and cleansing. So again, this just continues to emphasize the power of Jesus. He's Lord of the Sabbath. He can forgive sins, and just touching him has a healing impact. So, and that this is for all people. Tyre and Sidon, these Gentile regions. Jerusalem, the big city. Galilee, the country. So this is where we are now, and he teaches these Beatitudes. And these are the statements: the blessed are the poor, blessed are the hungry, blessed are those who weep. They're called the Beatitudes because in Latin, the phrase for blessed are sounds like beatific, and so these get shortened and just call them the Beatitudes. And we hear this, and it sounds like very pretty religious poetry almost. Blessed are the poor, and blessed are the hungry. And I have a friend who's a college minister and author and speaker. He's actually a lay preacher in the Diocese of Virginia, and he's preached here at St. Albans, named David Zoll. And he had a kind of paraphrased version of the Beatitudes. I'm going to read it. I love it. Here it is. Printed it out. And I heard him read this in a sermon on this passage, and I think it really gets to the heart of the matter. So stick with me here as I read Dave Zoll's paraphrase of the Beatitudes. Blessed are those whose lives don't add up, for they will be released from the tyranny of scorekeeping. And actually, here, I'm going to put this on the screen. I got it for you. I got you. Here we go. Blessed are those whose lives don't add up, for they will be released from the tyranny of scorekeeping. Blessed are those whose certainties have been stripped away, renewing their confusion, which is, after all, the mother of curiosity. Blessed are the humble and the humiliated, for they have been relieved of the burden of self-righteousness, which is the great enemy of love. Blessed are the heartbroken, for cracks are where the light gets in. Blessed are those for whom death is not a metaphor, for they have been returned to reality, which is the dwelling place of God. Blessed are those who cannot abide another funeral, for they have loved deeply. Blessed are those who can't seem to move away from loss, for they will not look to themselves for consolation. Blessed are the left behind and the overlooked, the delivery guy who refuses to make eye contact, and the senior citizen who hasn't received a visitor in months, for they are seen by God, whose gaze restores dignity and stature. Blessed are those for whom life feels like an ordeal, for Jesus surrounded himself with people like these. Blessed are those whose fears and anxieties exceed the reach of their coping mechanisms, for only those in need of help will be helped. Blessed are those who yearn for the world to be put to rights, for that yearning is a form of hope. Blessed are the cursed out and the canceled, especially for reasons of their own making, for they will be quick to listen and slow to judge. Blessed are those who don't condemn their sibling for not making better choices, because there, but for the grace of God, go they, and may yet still go. Blessed are the forgivers, because at the end of the day, as St. Dolly Parton tells us, what else is there? Blessed are they who hear that they are forgiven, for they have nothing left to hide. Well, that's the stuff right there, and I'll be happy to share that with the class. I'll have Hillary send that out to you guys. Man, that's the Beatitudes. That captures the spirit of it. It's the turning over and upside down of everything you think about the world, because the world would say the humiliated should be tossed aside. I've been thinking about, so we're seeing right now a presidential election play out, and obviously there's debate about the fairness and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not going to get into it, but it certainly does evidence the fact that everybody wants to win and nobody wants to lose. Jesus in the Beatitudes saying, blessed are the losers, is what he's saying. Blessed are the humiliated. There's Carl Lentz, this famous pastor of Justin Bieber at Hillsong, New York, and he had an affair. He's been fired. His life is ruined. His life is over, and he should probably take a long and maybe permanent break from ministry. Nevertheless, his total humiliation and destruction of the world he had built and the facade that existed means that he's now in a place where he might actually be in reality and might actually find some help and some hope. I think about this book. Is it behind me? No, I think it's over here. Oh, yeah. This is what I keep near. So you've been publicly shamed, and it's sort of about cancel culture and what happens when you do something embarrassing online and it goes viral and everybody sees it. This was written in 2015, so it's an old book now. But Jonathan Ronson, John Ronson, great author. So you've been publicly shamed. He gets this dynamic and talks about it in a way that I think was prescient. So. The Beatitudes just, again, turn upside down our thinking about what the world is actually like. And he says that all the categories you think you want to be in, rich, full, laughing, praised by your community and your family and all that, he says, woe to all of them. Because there is this sense in which success has a way of blinding you. Contentment has a way of blinding you, sort of makes you unaware of what's really going on in the world. I have a lot of friends, deep, devoted Christian friends, who are white and grew up in a largely white culture, no black friends, no black associates. And one of the things over this summer is they saw the protests about racial equity begin to kind of spread over the land. Just had no idea what it was like to live in fear of being pulled over, or just to have, there's not a situation in your life where you can't walk in and have race not be an issue. These friends, and this is just from some of their Facebook posts, and these are people that some are conservative, some are liberal, some are nothing, or in the middle, but these are folks who grew up white and just never really had to think about their race and realize that there's a whole group of Americans who cannot not think about their race because it colors every interaction they have. This was a sort of they themselves are sort of woe to us. We were rich, we were full, we could sort of ignore that there was a problem, and now we see what it is. So it's Jesus is teaching here that often suffering, humiliation, hunger, lack, failure, all that stuff is what actually makes you open to seeing reality and being open now to the work of God, as the paraphrase says. We get into some final things here about loving enemies, and this is the famous stuff about turning the cheek, and if somebody asks you to go 1 mile, go an extra mile, and all that sort of stuff. And I want to say about this in Luke 6, it's the hardest part of Christianity, and therefore it is ignored. It is talked about in theory, but completely ignored in practice. I know some Christian people who are terrible online to people who disagree with them. I mean, Christian people, and this is on the right and the left, who think they are right, they are correct, and that other people are wrong and must be then destroyed publicly because of it. And, of course, every human being has the temptation to do it. But do you hear how impossible this is? I mean, let me read it again. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. So if you've ever been tempted to steal a lawn sign of somebody who you disagree with, you didn't do this, because you're supposed to pray for that person that you don't like, and you're supposed to love them. And it says if somebody strikes you in the other cheek, you don't then go get a lawyer and press charges. You turn them the other cheek so they can make sure they hit that one too. It's unbelievable, this passage. Unbelievable. If Christians followed this, all lawyers would be out of business, because anytime somebody, he says this is crazy. I'm looking for one particular. Oh yeah. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. Are you kidding? This is the Jesus way. And this is why everybody ignores this, and nobody actually does this stuff. Now, I hope they do. And when people do it, it is incredible. It is transformative. I know one Christian speaker, a pastor, has a PhD in theology, and he summed Christianity up like this. It's a talk I'll never forget. He looked at this crowd of people and he said, resign, resign, resign. You could also say give up. You could say yield. Just resign. Don't fight for your rights. Don't stand up for yourself. And I want to put a big caveat here. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out of it. Whether it's emotionally or physically abusive. There's a pattern of destructive behavior that is evil and wrong, and you need to extricate yourself from that situation. I'm talking about the sort of the vastly more universal experience of people who are just there's some people out there that they hate, and they want to take them down publicly or in their hearts or in conversation with their family, how horrible those people are out there. That is anathema to the Christian gospel, and you should give up. You should yield. If you have someone who is an enemy, you should spend all your time in prayer for them. I think about how there's a lot of people who think certain ethnic groups or certain nationalities are our enemies and should be, I've heard everything from keep them out of our country to nuke them, which if you're a Christian, you're actually not allowed to say that, because you have to pray for them and you have to love them, and not just not love tolerate. The word is love. Actively serve them. What can you do to help them? That's what the command is. So, incredibly hard, crazy, and Jesus says the reason for all this is because this is how God treats you. And this is why I say all this ethical teaching means nothing if we don't root it in the fact of God's love for us, which is why Jesus then gets into this teaching about a tree and its fruit. And we're just going to kind of skip over to the end of the chapter where he kind of makes this very clear and says, let me find it here. This is verse 43. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. So the teaching here is, because Jesus has told us now what it is to do good. As we said, Christian ethics. Love your enemy. Let yourself be taken advantage of. If somebody steals from you, don't try to get it back. Don't press charges. Don't file a lawsuit. If somebody has committed fraud, let them get away with it. Let them extort. Let them embezzle. This is what he's teaching. I know it's hard. Find another religion if you don't like it, because this is Christianity. Sorry. Jesus says, though, where this all comes from, if you're able to live this way, it comes only from your heart. And you have to be a good tree that produces good fruit. This is good fruit, this way of living and acting. But it only comes from a heart that has been transformed. It doesn't come from a bad tree, a bad heart. And there's a Christian writer, teacher, Lutheran pastor named Nadia Bolz-Weber, and she says a lot of Christians, their good deeds, they're basically, she says, we're taping fruit to our trees. Our tree has not been transformed. Our heart has not been transformed, but we're kind of tying fruit to our branches. We're taping fruit to the branches, and it's hypocrisy. And this is why Jesus' teaching is so hard. But he says, if you want to become a good tree, how this happens is you get connected to the mercy of God. And you get connected to your own reality, backing up to this teaching about the plank in your eye and trying to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Basically he's saying, hey, you got something stuck in your teeth there. You got a little piece of broccoli in there while you have like a giant like hot dog just still stuck to your face. He says, deal with your own situation first before you try to help somebody else. And so there's like an invitation to see yourself as you really are. And if you do that, you will see that you are no better than any person who's ever walked the earth, that you are a sinner, that you are self-absorbed, that you always let yourself off the hook while you judge other people for doing the same thing. You care about your own needs. You'd much rather hear people listen to you than you listen to them. You're much more concerned about looking good in the eyes of other people. You're much more concerned about presenting a good face to people as opposed to being honest. Like, this is just humanity. And I'm not saying that this is somebody for whom this is not also true for me. Like, this is humanity. And Jesus says if you get real about that stuff, you'll realize that you're only standing before God is because you are completely and totally forgiven, because God is a God of infinite love and mercy. And that's the title of a Beach Boys song, Love and Mercy, which is why I said Jesus is a Beach Boys fan. So the point of this here, we think Christian ethics is about what movies am I allowed to watch, what cuss words can I use. You can't use the real cuss words. You have to use the fake Christian cuss words like darn, shoot, gosh, shucks. Those are all allowed. You change some vowels and consonants, and those are holy. You use the other vowels and consonants, unholy. And this is how we often think of Christian ethics. The lamest stuff, the dumbest stuff. I mean, it matters to some extent. Be polite and all that stuff. But Jesus' ethics is, do you love people, and more importantly, do you love your enemies? Do you love your enemies? If you're liberal, do you love conservatives? If you're conservatives, do you love liberals? You see these flags, and I saw a flag I went down to Bolivar Peninsula, where people drive Jeeps on the beach, and somebody had a flag. And this is not a partisan statement, because you can be a Republican or Democrat, but if you're a Christian, this is not allowed. It said a bad word that begins with the letter that comes after E in the alphabet. That bad word, your feelings. And that is antithetical and 100% diametrically opposed to the way Jesus talks about how we should treat people. Our neighbors, yes, but also our friends. And this attitude, which sadly exists on the right and the left, is diabolical. So, but again, me just telling you to not be that way is impossible. To be merciful only comes if you know that you have received mercy. So my only advice to you would be to get in touch with the place of your own failures, to look at your own catastrophes. Where have you crashed and burned in life? And how has God responded to you in that? And if you can get to that place, that is the seed that, if planted and watered, will grow into the kind of tree that produces good fruit. And good fruit is not like Christian goody two-shoes, combing your hair and tucking in your shirt kind of morals. A good tree that produces good fruit. The good fruit that Jesus is talking about is love of enemy, love of neighbor, but what's really hard is love of enemy, and this kind of turning the cheek mindset. So that's going to be the kind of summary of today's really horrible, awful, difficult, but gorgeous teaching in Luke 6. So I'm just kind of looking at the comments here as we wrap up here. Wanda says, God help me, and that is the stuff, Wanda. That is the stuff. God help me is exactly where we should all be at this place. That's why in our liturgy, when we begin with saying the summary of the law, we quote Jesus at the beginning of our service of communion, where he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And implied in that is love your enemy too. Our response is, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. Not, yes we can. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. No, it's have mercy. That's exactly what we should be. And as Pam says, another good observation heard long ago, there's something about me in that person I hate. Yes, exactly right. There's something about me in that person I hate. Lizagawa, thank you for the compliment. Jane, you're welcome. And also, yes, Jane, we will email this paraphrase of the Beatitudes to you guys. Just checking here on YouTube now if there's any questions here or comments. I'm not seeing any, so I'm just going to assume. Donna Gallagher noted the tribute to Leonard Cohen. Yes, Donna, you are not the only one on YouTube. There are 4 people watching our YouTube stream right now, possibly more because I actually have 2 YouTube streams going through some technological gap. All right, so that's all I've got for Luke chapter 6. Thank you for tuning in with us today. I hope to see you all next Wednesday. And again, I think our technical issues are worked out. Thank you for sticking with me and your graciousness with us. It is 11:25 here in Waco, Texas, as I'm talking right now. At noon, we have our service of Holy Communion, our midweek Wednesday service. That's outdoors in the Porte Cochère, the carport in front of our new entrance in our parking lot. After that, at 1 p.m., we will have a carillon concert in honor of our veterans as we observe Veterans Day. So if you want to park somewhere on the corner of Columbus and 30th Street, or you can bring a lawn chair or a blanket and sit out there on the lawn, make sure you're distanced and masked and all that sort of stuff. But do as we remember our veterans, do come by at 1 p.m. as we ring our bells in honor of Veterans Day. And, by the way, those bells are part of a big campaign we have right now to renew and restore our church. And if you missed the town hall on Sunday night, it's on YouTube and Facebook, and you can watch that, and you can see all about the plans for the church. We would love it if you haven't already made a pledge. A lot of people have. I think I signed 40 thank you letters today. If you would like to make a pledge, and we really need everybody's participation to do this, we would love it if you could just make a pledge to the Renew and Restore campaign to bring our church really to restore this beautiful space, preserve the beauty, realize the vision of the founders of this parish, and we'd love to have your support in that as we all come together to do that. And you can go to stalmondswaco.org/renew restore to do so, or just click campaign on our website. So glad you're here. God bless you. See you next week, and maybe see you for our Veterans Day carillon concert. Remember, God is merciful, and that's the stuff. See you next week.